Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the stars through the main window. The year was 2387, and everything was about to change forever. He had been a ship commander for 12 years, but nothing had prepared him for what was coming. The communication system made a sound, and Jake turned to look at the screen. The message was simple but terrible. Alien ships were coming to Earth, and they wanted all humans to give up or die. Admiral Lisa Murphy called all ship commanders to a meeting on her flagship. Jake took a small shuttle to reach her ship, which was called the UES Guardian. When he arrived, he saw that Lisa looked worried, but not afraid. She had been fighting space pirates and rebels for 20 years, and her face showed the marks of many battles. Around the table sat 15 other commanders from different human colonies. They all knew this day would come, but hoped it never would. Lisa spoke in a clear voice. The aliens called themselves the Kithara Empire, and they had been watching humans for 5 years. They had technology that was much better than anything humans had built. Their ships were made of some kind of crystal that could not be broken by human weapons. They moved faster than human ships and had guns that could destroy whole cities in seconds. The Kithara had sent one message to Earth. Humans must surrender all their colonies and become slaves, or every human in space would be killed. Captain Ben Collins raised his hand and asked how many alien ships were coming. Lisa looked at her data pad and said the number was over 10,000. The human fleet had only 800 ships total, and most of them were small patrol boats. The aliens also had soldiers that were 3 times stronger than humans and could live in space without special suits. Every fact Lisa shared made the situation look worse. Jake asked what Earth Command had decided to do. Lisa smiled for the first time during the meeting. Earth had voted to fight. Every human colony had been asked what they wanted to do, and the answer was the same everywhere. Humans would not become slaves. They would fight even if they could not win. Lisa said she was proud to serve with people who chose freedom over safety. The alien fleet arrived 3 days later. Jake watched from his bridge as the Kithara ships came out of jump space near Proxima Station. The alien vessels were beautiful and terrible at the same time. They looked like huge crystals that caught the light from the nearby star and threw it back in rainbow colors. Each alien ship was twice as big as the largest human ship. They moved through space like they were swimming in water instead of flying through nothing. Admiral Lisa Murphy gave the order to attack. The human fleet moved forward in formation with their weapons ready. Jake felt his heart beat fast as his ship got closer to the enemy. The first human missiles hit the alien ships and exploded in bright flashes. When the light faded, the alien ships were still there without any damage. Their crystal hulls had not even been scratched. The aliens fired back, and Jake saw what their weapons could do. Beams of purple light reached out from the crystal ships and touched human vessels. Where the light hit the human ships, simply melted away like ice in hot water. 3 human ships died in the first 10 seconds of the battle. Jake ordered his crew to keep firing even though their weapons did nothing to the enemy. Captain Ben Collins was commanding the UES Liberty when the aliens focused their fire on his ship. Jake watched on his screen as purple beams hit Ben's vessel, again and again. The Liberty's hull began to glow red-hot and then white-hot. Ben's voice came over the radio telling his crew to get to the escape pods. He stayed on his bridge until every person on his ship was safe. The Liberty exploded just as the last pod got away. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over 60% of the human fleet was gone. Jake's ship had survived, but many others had not. The aliens stopped shooting and sent another message. They expected humans to surrender now that they had seen what Kithara weapons could do. The alien commander said humans had fought bravely, but now they must accept that resistance was impossible. Admiral Lisa Murphy was still alive on her damaged flagship. Her ship's weapons were broken and her engines were barely working, but she was not ready to give up. She sent a message to every human colony and every surviving ship. The message was short, but it changed everything. She said humans would stand together, fight together, and survive together. She said the war was just beginning. Jake watched his communication screen as reports came in from human colonies. Instead of surrender messages, he saw something that surprised him. Civilians were volunteering to join the military. Farmers were learning to use guns. Factory workers were building weapons instead of making normal goods. Children were helping. Their parents dig defensive positions around cities. On New Texas colony, Amy Price was an engineer who worked on mining equipment. When she heard about the battle, she went to the colonial governor and offered to help. She said mining explosives could be turned into weapons and mining drills could be made into cannons. The governor put her in charge of a team of workers who began converting peaceful tools into instruments of war. Dr. Carl Lewis ran a medical center on Europa Station. After the first battle, he realized that his facility could make more than medicine. His team began producing ammunition and explosive devices using chemicals from the medical supplies. They turned surgical tools into weapons and medical scanners into targeting systems. The Cathara commanders could not understand what they were seeing. In their experience, species that lost battles would surrender immediately. Their empire had conquered dozens of worlds and it always worked the same way. Superior technology led to quick victory, which led to immediate surrender. But humans were doing something different. They were preparing to fight harder after losing than they had. Before the first battle even started, Jake Harrison received new orders from Admiral Murphy. Human ships that could still fly were to spread out and hide in asteroid fields and nebulas. They would wait for the aliens to land on human worlds and then attack from behind. It was not the kind of fighting that human military training had prepared them for, but it was the kind of fighting that might give them a chance to survive. The first phase of the war was over, and humans had lost badly. But as Jake looked at the reports coming from human colonies, he realized something important. Losing the first battle had not broken human spirit. Instead, it had made humans angry and determined to prove that they could not be conquered. The real war was about to begin. 6 months had passed since the first battle, and the galaxy looked very different now. Supreme Commander Vexitar stood in his crystal command center on the conquered world of New Angeles and studied reports from his field commanders. The war should have been over by now, but something was wrong with these humans. They refused to accept defeat even when defeat was obvious to everyone. The Cathara Empire controlled 12 human worlds and had destroyed most of the human space fleet. Vexitar's forces had landed on planets across human space and taken control of major cities. His soldiers patrolled the streets with their advanced weapons and energy shields. Everything looked like a normal conquest, but the reports told a different story. Sergeant Roy Baker hid in the ruins of an old factory on New Texas and planned his next attack. 3 months ago, he had been a regular soldier in the Colonial Defense Force. Now he led a group of 20 fighters who struck at alien supply convoys and disappeared before the enemy could respond. His team included people who had never been soldiers before the war started. Nancy White had been a school teacher before the aliens came. Now she coordinated intelligence networks across 3 cities. She had taught children how to read and write, and now she taught resistance fighters how to gather information and stay hidden. Her network of former students and parents provided reports on alien movements that helped Roy plan his attacks. Paul Garcia was a mechanic who had fixed farming equipment for 15 years. When the aliens landed, he began building bombs from fertilizer and tractor parts. His explosives were crude compared to military weapons, but they worked well enough to destroy alien vehicles and supply depots. Paul taught other mechanics and farmers how to turn peaceful tools into weapons of war. The Cathara had expected humans to fight like other species they had conquered. Most civilizations used formal military tactics with organized units and clear command structures. The Cathara could counter such tactics easily because their technology was superior and their soldiers were better trained. But humans were not fighting like other species. Lieutenant Kate Williams had discovered something important about their alien enemies. The Cathara were stronger and faster than humans, but they needed to recharge their energy weapons and shields every few hours. During recharge periods, they were vulnerable to attack. Kate began planning raids that took advantage of these weak moments. Her fighters would watch alien patrols from hidden positions and time their movements. When the aliens went to their recharge stations, Kate's team would attack supply lines or communication equipment. The aliens would respond, but by then the humans had disappeared into tunnels or ruins. This pattern repeated dozens of times across occupied worlds. On Earth, the resistance took a different form. Tony Adams had been a construction foreman before the war, but now he commanded underground fighters in the ruins of Chicago. The aliens controlled the surface, but humans moved through subway tunnels and basement networks. Tony's people had turned the underground city into a weapon against the occupying forces. Scientist Helen Clark worked with Tony to understand captured alien technology. She had been studying physics at the university when the aliens landed. Now she spent her time taking apart Kythera equipment and learning how it worked. Helen discovered that alien devices were incredibly advanced, but also incredibly complex. Small changes to their programming could make them malfunction in useful ways. Helen's team learned to hack alien communication systems and feed false information to Kythera commanders. They made alien weapons think friendly forces were enemies. They caused alien vehicles to break down at critical moments. The aliens began to distrust their own technology because it no longer worked reliably. The psychological effects were as important as the physical damage. Kythera soldiers had conquered dozens of worlds without serious resistance. They were used to quick victories and grateful populations. Instead, they found humans who fought back constantly and seemed to enjoy making their lives difficult. Alien patrol leaders reported that humans would attack even when badly outnumbered. Human prisoners tried to escape even from maximum security facilities. Human civilians refused to cooperate with alien administrators. Children threw rocks at alien soldiers, and adults spat at them in the streets. The Kythera had never encountered such unified resistance. Commander Vextar called for more troops and better weapons, but the problems continued. His supply convoys were attacked daily. His communication network suffered constant sabotage. His soldiers were nervous and tired from watching for human attacks that could come from anywhere at any time. The alien commander began to understand that humans fought differently because they thought differently. Most species valued survival above all else and would surrender when resistance became hopeless. But humans seemed to value something else more than survival. They called it freedom, and they were willing to die for it in ways that made no sense to Kythera logic. Captain Steve Johnson commanded one of the few human ships that had survived the first battle. For 6 months, he had hidden in the asteroid belt around Kepler Station and watched alien movements. His ship was damaged and his crew was tired, but they had been learning from captured alien equipment and developing new tactics. Steve realized that alien ships were designed to fight other ships that followed standard tactical patterns. The Kythera expected enemies to form battle lines and exchange fire until one side retreated or was destroyed. But human ships could fight differently by using asteroid fields and space debris as cover. His engineer, Maria Santos, had been working on modifications to their weapons and shields. She discovered that human technology was less advanced but more flexible than alien systems. Human computers could be reprogrammed quickly, while alien systems needed complex procedures to change their functions. This meant humans could adapt their tactics during battle while aliens could not. The breakthrough came when physicist Alan Brown analyzed recordings of the first battle. He noticed that Kythera ships moved in perfect formation and responded to threats with predetermined patterns. Their coordination was flawless, but it was also predictable. If humans could learn these patterns, they could use them against the aliens. Alan worked with other surviving scientists to create a database of alien tactical responses. They studied how Kythera ships reacted to different types of attacks and began to see patterns that could be exploited. The aliens' greatest strength was their perfect coordination, but it was also a weakness because it made them inflexible. Reports began reaching Earth that other human colonies were having success with guerrilla tactics. On Mars, underground fighters had destroyed 3 alien supply bases in a single week. On Titan, saboteurs had caused a major alien command center to lose power for 2 days. The pattern was spreading across human space. General Nina Foster coordinated resistance activities from a hidden base in the Australian outback. She received reports from dozens of resistance cells and began to see how local successes could be combined into larger operations. The aliens controlled territory, but humans controlled the knowledge of that territory. Nina realized that humans had one advantage the aliens could not match. Every human world was home to people who had lived there for generations. They knew every tunnel, every hidden path, and every secret place. The aliens were strangers who depended on maps and sensors that could be fooled or sabotaged. The war was changing from a conflict between military forces to a struggle between different ways of thinking. The Kythera believed in hierarchy and order and technological superiority. Humans believed in individual initiative and adaptation, and the willingness to sacrifice for principles. These different beliefs led to different ways of fighting. Commander Vextar received a report that made him understand how serious the situation had become. 3 human worlds that had been declared fully pacified were experiencing coordinated uprisings. Supply lines that had been secure for months were under constant attack. Alien soldiers were requesting transfers away from human space because the stress was affecting their performance. For the first time in his military career, Vexatar began to doubt that victory was certain. The Cathara Empire had never faced an enemy that grew stronger after losing battles. But humans seemed to learn from defeat and become more dangerous with each passing month. The war that should have ended in days had become a grinding struggle with no clear end in sight. 2 years had passed since the aliens first arrived, and the war had changed everything. Commander Vextar no longer slept well in his Crystal Command Center. His soldiers reported strange dreams about human fighters who appeared from nowhere and vanished like ghosts. The Cathara had learned to fear the darkness because that was when humans struck hardest. Captain Steve Johnson flew through the debris field around Europa Station in a ship that looked nothing like the vessel he had commanded at the start of the war. Maria Santos had rebuilt their engines using captured alien technology and improved their power output by 40%. The hull was covered with stealth plating taken from destroyed Cathara fighters. Human weapons fired alien energy bolts that could penetrate enemy shields. Steve's crew had grown from 30 humans to 50 beings from different worlds. They had rescued alien prisoners who chose to fight alongside humans rather than return to the Empire. The ship's computer spoke 12 languages, and the crew worked together despite having different ways of thinking and different physical abilities. The breakthrough in the war came when physicist Alan Brown made a discovery that changed everything. He was studying captured Cathara command protocols when he realized something important about their society. Every decision had to be approved by higher commanders, who were often located on distant worlds. A simple tactical change could take days to implement because it needed authorization from multiple levels of hierarchy. Alan shared his findings with resistance leaders across human space. The information spread quickly through hidden communication, networks that the aliens had never been able to completely shut down. Human fighters began exploiting this weakness by changing their tactics faster than the aliens could respond. General Nina Foster used this knowledge to plan the liberation of New Angeles. She coordinated attacks from 3 different directions that confused the alien defenders. When Cathara forces moved to counter the first attack, humans struck from the second direction. When aliens repositioned to handle both threats, the third attack hit their command center. The battle for New Angeles lasted 18 hours and ended with complete human victory. The aliens retreated to their ships and fled the planet, leaving behind massive amounts of equipment and supplies. More importantly, they left behind proof that humans could win major battles against overwhelming odds. News of the victory spread to every human world and colony. Resistance fighters who had been hiding in tunnels and ruins emerged to attack alien positions with new confidence. The psychological effect was enormous. Humans had always believed they could win, but now they had proof that victory was possible. Meanwhile, diplomat Chris Parker was making contact with other species that had been conquered by the Cathara Empire. He worked from a hidden base in the asteroid belt where refugees from a dozen different worlds had gathered. Chris discovered that humans were not the first to resist the Empire, but they were the first to maintain resistance for more than a few months. The Velnari had been enslaved by the Cathara 300 years ago. They were a species of natural engineers who had built much of the Empire's technology under alien supervision. When Chris met with their secret representatives, they offered to share technical knowledge in exchange for tactical expertise. The first joint operation between humans and Velnari took place at a mining colony on Kepler 442b. Admiral Kevin Wright commanded the human forces while Velnari engineers provided stealth technology that made human ships nearly invisible to alien sensors. The combined fleet struck the mining operation and destroyed it completely before the aliens knew they were under attack. Word of the alliance spread to other oppressed species. The Thylan had been conquered 50 years ago and forced to serve as soldiers in the Cathara military. Some Thylan units began defecting to join human forces. The Zephyrians had lost their homeworld 20 years ago, and many of their survivors chose to fight alongside humans rather than live as refugees. Commander Julia Adams piloted the first truly hybrid warship built by the growing alliance. Her vessel combined human tactical flexibility with Velnari stealth systems and Thylan defensive shields. The crew included beings from 4 different species who had learned to work together despite having completely different ways of thinking. Julia's ship proved that diversity was a source of strength rather than weakness. When they encountered problems that stumped human engineers, the Velnari had solutions. When Velnari logic suggested one approach, Thylan intuition pointed to better alternatives. The different perspectives combined to create innovations that no single species could achieve alone. The Cathera Empire faced rebellion on multiple fronts for the first time in centuries. Emperor Zixthala ordered the deployment of planet-killer weapons to end the resistance quickly. These massive devices could destroy entire worlds in minutes and had been used to terrify other species into submission. But human intelligence networks learned about the weapons before they could be used. Commander Vextar found himself attacking empty planets while human fleets ambushed the weapon platforms from hidden positions. The planet killers were destroyed before they could fire a single shot. The Empire's ultimate weapons had been turned into traps. Dr. Pete Morgan led a team of scientists from multiple species who were developing new technologies faster than anyone thought possible. They created adaptive armor that learned from each attack and became stronger. They built communication systems that could not be jammed by alien technology. They designed weapons that improved their performance based on combat experience. The key to these advances was collaboration between species with different scientific traditions. Human creativity combined with Velnari precision and Thylan intuition produced results that amazed everyone involved. Alien refugees contributed knowledge of Cathera technology, while humans provided new ways of thinking about old problems. Emperor Zixthala realized that his empire faced a crisis unlike anything in its long history. The humans had done more than resist conquest. They had inspired other species to remember that freedom was possible. Rebellion was spreading across imperial space as world after world joined the growing alliance. The Emperor called for a meeting of his highest commanders to discuss new strategies. The traditional approach of overwhelming force was not working against enemies who grew stronger after each defeat. The humans had turned military science upside down by proving that spirit and determination could overcome technological superiority. Commander, Vextar attended the meeting, but he no longer believed that victory was certain. His reports described human fighters who seemed to multiply after being defeated. He told stories of alien soldiers who chose to join human forces rather than continue serving the Empire. He warned that the rebellion was spreading faster than Imperial forces could contain it. The meeting ended without any clear plan for stopping the human-led alliance. Traditional Cathera tactics assumed that enemies would fight like civilized beings with organized military structures and rational, strategic goals. But humans fought like they had nothing to lose and everything to gain. Back on the front lines, Jake Harrison received his first promotion in 2 years. Admiral Lisa Murphy had made him captain of a battle group that included ships from 6 different species. His flagship was a captured Cathera cruiser that had been modified with human weapons and alien defense systems. Jake looked at his diverse crew and marveled at how much had changed since the first day of the war. Humans were no longer fighting alone against impossible odds. They had become the center of a growing alliance that included dozens of species, united by a simple idea. Freedom was worth fighting for, and victory was possible if different peoples worked together. The war was far from over, but the balance had shifted. The Cathera Empire was no longer expanding. Instead, it was contracting as world after world joined the rebellion. The aliens who had seemed invincible 2 years ago now faced enemies who learned from every battle and grew stronger with each passing day. Reports came in from across the galaxy telling the same story. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were remembering how to fight. Worlds that had accepted imperial rule were declaring independence. The human example had sparked something that could not be stopped by force or threatened into submission. Commander Vextar stood in his command center and watched displays showing rebel activity across a dozen sectors. The humans had done something that the Cathera considered impossible. They had turned a military conquest into a war of ideas, and in that kind of war the Empire was losing badly. The fourth year of war brought changes that no one had expected when the fighting first began. The Velnari had been enslaved by the Cathera Empire for 3 centuries, but now they worked openly with human forces to plan attacks on Imperial installations. Their underground networks reached across the galaxy carrying messages of hope and technical knowledge to species that had forgotten what freedom looked like. Admiral Kevin Wright commanded the first major joint operation between human and Velnari forces. The target was a massive mining complex on Kepler 442b, where thousands of alien prisoners worked in conditions that killed dozens every day. The operation would test whether different species could coordinate complex military actions, despite having completely different ways of thinking and fighting. The Velnari brought stealth technology that made human ships nearly invisible to enemy sensors. Their engineers had spent generations building Imperial technology and knew exactly how to defeat the systems they had been forced to create. The humans contributed tactical flexibility and the willingness to take risks that other species found terrifying. Kevin's fleet approached the mining world using flight patterns that confused alien tracking systems. The Velnari ships seemed to flicker in and out of existence while human vessels moved in ways that made no mathematical sense. The Cathera defenders had never faced an attack that combined such different approaches to warfare. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended with complete victory for the Alliance forces. More importantly, the liberated mining complex became a symbol for oppressed species across the galaxy. The Velnari proved that cooperation with humans could achieve what centuries of secret resistance had failed to accomplish. Word of the victory reached 12 other species within days. The Thylan military units that had been forced to serve, the Empire began defecting in large numbers. The Zephyrian refugees who had lived in Imperial camps for 20 years started forming resistance cells. The psychological impact was greater than the military significance. Commander Julia Adams piloted the first truly integrated warship built by the growing Alliance. Her crew included humans who provided tactical innovation, Velnari, who handled technical systems, and Thylan, who coordinated defensive operations. The ship itself was a hybrid design that combined the best features of multiple technological traditions. Julia's vessel proved that diversity created strength rather than weakness. When human intuition suggested aggressive tactics, Velnari analysis provided the technical knowledge needed to make them work. When Velnari logic indicated caution, Thylan experience suggested alternatives that balanced risk and opportunity. The different perspectives created solutions that no single species could develop. The success of integrated crews led to rapid expansion of the Alliance fleet. Ships that had been built by one species were modified by engineers from others. Weapons, designed for human tactics, were adapted for Velnari stealth missions. Defense systems created by Thylan engineers were enhanced with human innovation and Velnari precision. The Cathera Empire responded to these developments by deploying planet-killer weapons for the first time in 2 centuries. These massive devices could destroy entire worlds in minutes and had been held in reserve as the ultimate deterrent against rebellion. Emperor Zixathala ordered their use against 3 Alliance strongholds, but the human intelligence networks had grown beyond anything the Empire could track or counter. Communication specialist Rick Davis coordinated information gathering across dozens of species and hundreds of worlds. His networks learned about the planet killers before they left their hidden bases and tracked their movements across space. Instead of finding populated worlds to destroy the planet killer, weapons arrived at empty systems where Alliance fleets were waiting in ambush. The massive weapons were powerful but slow and vulnerable to coordinated attack. Human fighters used kamikaze tactics to disable their shields, while Velnari ships targeted critical systems with precision strikes. All 3 planet killers were destroyed before they could fire a single shot. The weapons that were supposed to end the rebellion instead became symbols of Imperial failure. The Empire had revealed its ultimate threat and seen it defeated by the Alliance that grew stronger with each passing month. Dr. Pete Morgan led scientific research teams that included representatives from 8 different species. They worked in hidden laboratories scattered across Alliance space, developing technologies that combined the best insights from multiple civilizations. The pace of innovation was incredible because different species approached the same problems from completely different directions. Human creativity sparked new ideas that Velnari precision turned into working devices. Thylan intuition suggested approaches that human logic refined into practical applications. Zephyrian artistic traditions inspired designs that other species made functional. The collaboration produced advances that amazed everyone involved. The research teams created adaptive armor that learned from each attack and modified its properties to provide better protection. They built communication systems that used quantum entanglement to send messages instantly across any distance. They designed weapons that analyzed enemy defenses and automatically adjusted their output for maximum effectiveness. More importantly, they developed manufacturing techniques that allowed primitive colonies to produce advanced technology using local materials. Species that had been reduced to pre-industrial conditions by imperial occupation could now build modern weapons and equipment. The balance of technological advantage was shifting toward the Alliance. Emperor Zixthala faced the greatest crisis in the 1,000-year history of his empire. The rebellion had spread to 47 sectors and was growing faster than imperial forces could respond. Worse, the humans had inspired other species to remember capabilities they had been forced to abandon centuries ago. The Emperor called an emergency session of the Imperial Council to discuss radical new strategies. Traditional approaches were failing because the enemy refused to fight like a civilized military force. The Alliance used tactics that violated every principle of proper warfare and somehow achieved results that superior technology should have prevented. The council meeting lasted for days as commanders and administrators struggled to understand how their invincible empire was losing to inferior species. The humans had done something that Cathara science said was impossible. They had turned technological disadvantage into strategic advantage by refusing to accept the rules that governed civilized warfare. Commander Vexitar attended the council meetings, but his reports offered little hope for quick victory. He described Alliance forces that seemed to learn from every defeat and grow stronger after each battle. He told stories of Imperial soldiers who defected to join human-led units because they offered something the Empire could not provide. The debates in the council chamber revealed deep divisions within Cathara society. Military commanders wanted to use overwhelming force to crush the rebellion quickly. Political leaders worried that excessive violence would inspire more species to join the Alliance. Economic advisors calculated that the war was costing more resources than the Empire could afford to spend. Meanwhile, the Alliance continued to grow and develop new capabilities. Fleet Admiral Karen Thompson coordinated military operations across 30 sectors using communication systems that the Empire could not intercept or jam. Her forces included ships from 20 species using tactics that combined the best traditions of multiple civilizations. Karen's strategy was simple but effective. Alliance forces would attack Imperial installations and then withdraw before enemy reinforcements could arrive. The liberated facilities would be stripped of useful equipment and then destroyed to prevent recapture. Imperial forces found themselves defending empty buildings while Alliance fleets struck at new targets. The psychological warfare was as important as the physical attacks. Every successful raid proved that the Empire could be defeated. Every liberated world demonstrated that cooperation between species could achieve what individual resistance could not. The example of the Alliance inspired rebellion even in sectors where human forces had never appeared. Intelligence reports reached Alliance Command describing uprisings on dozens of worlds that had been pacified for generations. The Cathara Empire was discovering that controlling territory required more than military superiority. It required the consent of the governed, and that consent was being withdrawn on a massive scale. Jake Harrison received command of a battle group that included vessels from 12 different species. His flagship was a hybrid design that incorporated technologies from across Alliance space. The crew spoke 15 languages, but worked together with an efficiency that impressed observers from new member species. Jake looked at tactical displays, showing Alliance operations across the galaxy, and marveled at how much had changed since the first desperate battles 4 years ago. Humans were no longer fighting alone against impossible odds. They had become the catalyst for a galactic transformation that was reshaping the balance of power throughout known space. The war had evolved beyond a simple conflict between the Cathara, Empire, and human colonies. It had become a struggle between two different visions of how civilization should be organized. 7 years after the first alien ships had appeared in human space, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The Cathara Empire that had once controlled thousands of worlds was collapsing as species after species joined the alliance of free worlds. Emperor Zixthala sat in his crystal throne room on the imperial capital and watched reports of rebellion spreading across sectors that had been peaceful for centuries. Fleet Admiral Karen Thompson commanded the largest military force in galactic history. Her armada included vessels from 43 different species using tactics that combined the best traditions of dozens of civilizations. The ships themselves were works of art that demonstrated what different peoples could achieve when they worked together toward common goals. The Alliance fleet moved toward the Cathara homeworld using formations that no military academy had ever taught. Human ships provided tactical flexibility, while Velnari vessels contributed stealth technology and precision targeting. Thylan defenders coordinated shield systems, while Zephyrian fighters added speed and maneuverability. The diversity that the Empire had seen as weakness had become the Alliance's greatest strength. Karen stood on the bridge of her flagship and studied the tactical displays that showed the final approach to the Imperial capital. The defenses were formidable, but they had been designed to fight enemies who followed conventional military doctrine. The Alliance forces used methods that turned traditional defensive strategies into vulnerabilities. The battle for the Cathara homeworld began not with weapons but with words. Communications specialist Rick Davis broadcast a message to every being in the Imperial system. He spoke in 47 languages, and his words were simple but powerful. The Alliance offered freedom to all who wanted it and promised protection to those who chose cooperation over conquest. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Imperial defense stations began shutting down their weapons as Cathara operators refused orders to fire on Alliance ships. Whole fleets of Imperial vessels changed sides during the battle and joined the Alliance formation. The Empire was discovering that loyalty based on fear could not survive when people saw better alternatives. Emperor Zixthala watched from his throne room as his military commanders reported that their own forces were defecting faster than Alliance ships could accept surrenders. The carefully ordered society that had dominated the galaxy for 1,000 years was dissolving, as individual Cathara chose freedom over the only life they had ever known. The final assault on the Imperial Palace was led by Jake Harrison flying, the same ship he had commanded at the first battle 7 years earlier. The UES Defiance had been rebuilt and upgraded so many times that little of the original vessel remained. But Jake kept the name because it represented something important about the human spirit. Jake's crew included beings from 15 different worlds who had learned to work together despite having completely different ways of thinking. They communicated in a mixture of languages and hand signals that had evolved during years of cooperation. The bridge looked like a meeting of galactic representatives but functioned with the precision of a single organism. The palace defenses crumbled as Jake's forces approached. Imperial guards laid down their weapons and opened the gates rather than fight for a system that no longer offered them anything worth defending. The 1,000-year reign of the Cathara Empire ended not with a climactic battle, but with the quiet recognition that its time had passed. Emperor Zixthala met with Alliance representatives in his throne room surrounded by crystal walls that reflected light in patterns that had once symbolized imperial power. The negotiations were brief because the outcome was inevitable. The empire would be dissolved, and its territory incorporated into the Alliance of Free Worlds under principles that guaranteed self-determination for all species. The signing of the Galactic Freedom Accord took place in the same throne room, where emperors had once issued decrees that controlled the lives of trillions of beings. Representatives from 68 species signed the document that established new principles for galactic civilization. The right of all peoples to govern themselves became the foundation of interstellar law. Commander Julia Adams witnessed the ceremony from the observation deck where she stood with crew members from her hybrid warship. They represented the future of galactic society, where diversity was celebrated rather than suppressed and cooperation replaced conquest as the basis for relationships between species. The Accord established institutions that would prevent any single species from dominating others. The Alliance Council included representatives from all member worlds with voting power distributed according to population and contribution rather than military strength. The Alliance fleet would be commanded by officers from different species working together to protect freedom rather than expand territory. Dr. Pete Morgan was appointed to head the new Galactic Research Institute, where scientists from dozens of species would work together to solve problems that affected all civilizations. The collaborative methods that had won the war would be applied to challenges like disease poverty and the exploration of unknown regions of space. The transformation was not limited to political and military changes. The end of imperial rule released creative energies that had been suppressed for generations. Art, music, literature, and philosophy flourished as different species shared their cultural traditions and learned from each other. The galaxy became more interesting and beautiful than anyone had imagined possible. Trade networks that had been controlled by imperial bureaucrats became open markets where any species could participate on equal terms. Technologies that had been restricted to imperial elites were shared freely among alliance members. The economic benefits of cooperation quickly became obvious to everyone involved. Admiral Lisa Murphy, who had begun the war as commander of Earth's small defense fleet, was appointed as the first supreme commander of alliance forces. Her job was to ensure that the principles of the Accord were respected and that no species would again face the choice between slavery and extinction. Lisa established policies that reflected lessons learned during 7 years of desperate struggle. Military force would be used only to defend freedom, never to impose control. All species would contribute to common defense, but none would be required to fight against their own principles. The Alliance military would be a shield for liberty, not a sword for conquest. The Velnari were finally free to use their engineering skills for their own benefit rather than imperial projects. They began construction of new worlds designed specifically for their needs while sharing their technical knowledge with other species. The creativity that had been channeled into building imperial war machines was redirected toward peaceful purposes. The Thylon established new colonies in sectors that had been off-limits during imperial rule. Their natural diplomatic abilities made them ideal mediators when disputes arose between different species. The military experience they had gained while fighting for the Empire was put to use training Alliance defense forces. Rick Davis became the first director of galactic communications, responsible for maintaining the networks that allowed different species to coordinate their activities across vast distances. His systems ensured that no world would be isolated and that information would flow freely throughout Alliance space. Jake Harrison returned to his home colony on New Terra, where he was welcomed as a hero, but chose to live quietly as a civilian. He had seen enough of war to last several lifetimes, and wanted to spend his remaining years watching the peaceful galaxy that so many people had died to create. On quiet evenings, Jake would sit on his porch and look up at the stars, knowing that each point of light represented worlds where beings lived in freedom, because humans had refused to surrender. The war had ended not with humanity's victory over the aliens, but with the triumph of principles that transcended species boundaries. The Alliance continued to grow as news of the Accord reached distant sectors where other empires ruled through force. Species that had never heard of humans learned about the possibility of freedom and began organizing their own resistance movements. The example of the Alliance of Free Worlds inspired liberation movements across the galaxy. Children born after the war grew up in a universe where cooperation between different species was normal, rather than extraordinary. They learned about the time when empires ruled through fear and conquest, but they lived in an age when such things seemed as ancient as the wars between tribes on primitive worlds. The memorial, built on the site of the first battle at Proxima Station, bore a simple inscription that captured the essential truth that had made victory possible. It read that freedom defended is freedom preserved, and that some principles are worth any sacrifice to maintain. The stars belonged to all free beings and would remain free as long as people remembered the price of liberty. Jake Harrison had recorded, his final log entry as a military commander on the day the war ended. He wrote that humans had discovered something important during 7 years of desperate struggle. They had not fought forever because they were the strongest or the smartest species in the galaxy. They had fought forever because they understood that some things were worth defending, regardless of the cost.